Okay, thank you very much. And I'm really delighted we have a small enough group that you should feel free to stop me at any time by raising your hand, ask a question, and this enables us to be more interactive and for me to be able to respond to individual questions and comments that you have. So I always prefer a smaller group. All right, well, let's get started by asking any of you if you wrote anything about what I asked you to consider last week about your most memorable Jewish experience or your earliest Jewish experience. Did anybody write?
I wrote an earliest experience.
Okay.
Yeah, I did too.
Yeah, I did.
Fantastic. All right. Let me get the gallery view here. Who am I looking at? Let's see. Okay. Who wants to go first?
I'll go.
Okay.
Let me see. Who's going first?
And
Raise your hand. Oh, okay. Anne, great. Go ahead.
it's very short. My first memory is still clear. I was 8 and was asked if I would rather take piano lessons from my aunt, who was a concert pianist, or go to Hebrew school. Of course, I chose piano lessons. My younger brother was not given that choice. That's all I wrote. That was my first experience.
Okay, great. And and again, the whole idea is just to get started and to write something, and then you write something else. So even if you wrote a sentence, that's fine. That's great. All right. Someone else, earliest or most memorable Jewish experience. Anybody write anything?
How about Pearl? Pearl, how about you go next?
Yeah, I did. I grew up in a very Jewish home, so I can't remember when I didn't feel Jewish. On the other hand, I remember how disappointed I felt when my dad told me that not everybody was Jewish and most people were not. When I was 3 years old, we moved into our house in a mixed neighborhood. Patty, who lived down the street, became my friend. One day, she asked her mom if I could eat supper with them, and her mom said, yes, but I would have to go ask my mother. I would have to go in. So I ran home and asked my mother, and she said how nice it was for Patty's mother to invite me, but I can't go because they are not kosher. I asked, what does kosher mean? My mother said, the word means clean, but it has to do with what we can or cannot eat. So I ran back to Patty's house and told her I could not eat at her house because it wasn't clean. Patty's mom, and I actually remember this, Patty's mom called my mom, and the two of them ended up with a good laugh. I did have supper at Patty's house, as her mother promised my mother she would not serve me ham.
Wow, that's amazing. Everyone has these early memories, and you look at them decades later, and they're just amazing. So thank you for sharing that. That's really a different type of story, but powerful.
Rabbi, do you mind if I cut in? I wanted to share that. Reminded me of my early one, very similar. I remember I was probably about 6 or 7, and we went to a friend's house for brunch, and I was making my plate, and I put some bacon on my plate, and my father took me, my father's a rabbi, he took me into the garage, I remember, and he said, Ariel, we don't eat bacon. I said, why not? It smells delicious. I want to try it. He says, well, when you're old enough to make your own decisions and you can move out, you can make that choice for yourself in your own home. I said, okay, I'm going to move out tomorrow.
Moving out. Oh, gosh. Anyone else?
Judy.
Well, I wrote my earliest memory, but it's not, unfortunately, a happy one like those before me, so I'm not sure if you want me to share it.
Absolutely. Whatever. Share what you wrote.
Okay. As I said, it inspired me to start writing a memoir, so it's also a story that's a little bit longer. The only way I can tell you of my first memory of feeling Jewish is to give you some family history. My birth father, Max, was born in Warsaw, Poland in 1878. By the time Hitler began his plan to exterminate the Jews while taking over much of Europe, my father had grown his shoe business into one that included a large shoe factory in Warsaw. He was considered a very successful businessman. Max feared that the growing Nazi movement in Germany would invade Poland in 1939, and by 1940 would round up Polish Jews and force them into ghettos, the Warsaw Ghetto being the largest. Max, seeing the handwriting on the wall in 1938, made plans to escape Poland to the United States with his family. Jewish businesses were being confiscated by the Polish government. Max lost his business, and with his savings, Max and family fled Poland, making the trip by ship, as did other Jews sailing into New York Harbor and to Ellis Island. Standing in line to give his information, Max became more and more fearful and paranoid that the Nazis would follow him, arrest him, and throw him into prison, or even worse, as the rumors alluded. When he faced his interviewer, he noticed a long list of names in front of him. When asked his own name, he answered that his name was Max Rosenberg of Warsaw. His name was actually a long Polish name, which I cannot remember. Documentation of this disappeared after my older sister's death. Max hoped that with this Rosenberg name, a fairly common Jewish name, he and his family would assimilate into their new home. My father, his wife, and children settled in Wellesley, Massachusetts, where he built a new shoe business. Something happened which I could never find out, and he lost his family business, divorced, and was excommunicated by his entire family of 7 children. He ended up in New York in the early 1940s, married Molly, an old maid of 34 years, and started a new family and business. Being old and broke, his new business in the Bronx was a tiny shoe repair shop. He never learned English in his new American home and only spoke Polish and Yiddish. Molly, born in Ohio of Austrian descent, communicated with her new husband in Yiddish. Because of my father's choice of the last name at Ellis Island, I was born as Judy Rosenberg in 1950. In that same year, Julius and Ethel Rosenberg were arrested and subsequently executed in 1953 for conspiracy to commit espionage. As the first civilians to ever be executed for espionage, the name Rosenberg became almost synonymous for traitor. My first time hearing my name screamed at me by neighbors and schoolmates of my older brother and sister were in slurs, "You dirty Jews" and "Jew traitors." I was too young to understand these slurs. We children couldn't communicate with our father because of a language issue, and our mother ignored my brother and me. She would speak primarily to my older sister, Rosalind, 7 years older than I. My sister became, at age 9 or 10, my primary caregiver. My father died in 1953 when I was just 3 years old, and my mother suffered from a brain tumor and was bedridden most of the time. I had to rely on my older siblings to explain what Jew meant. Being Jewish was something we spoke about, was not something we spoke about. My father, when he was alive, would take my brother to a local Orthodox shul a couple of blocks away each week to pray. My brother Reuben at the time eventually changed his name when adopted years later to Robert Reuben. Didn't understand the Jewish service in Yiddish and Hebrew and couldn't explain anything to me. He just consistently spoke about how Jews were different and not liked, and it was best to keep a low profile. This was something as both my brother and sister experienced, having rocks thrown at them and once being assaulted on their way home from school. We moved out of the Bronx in 1951, and when my father lost his shoe repair shop and became quite ill with diabetes and colon cancer. We are now living in a low-income project on 23rd and 10th near the Hudson River. Now a very yuppie area was poor, dirty, rundown set of apartment buildings, and most residents like us were on welfare. We were living on $60 a month for a family of 4, difficult even in those days. It would be many years later that I learned enough to no longer consider myself an underdog and to gain a sense of pride regarding my Jewishness. Now, this is just the beginning because they asked me to write a whole memoir. So it's going to be continued.
Well, Judy, that was very powerful and poignant and revealing. And you know, you raised something that's very interesting about, you know, does this spiritual memoir or legacy letter that we're writing, does it have to be a whitewashed, pristine version of ourselves, and should it never have anything negative or overly revealing about us, especially if it's for grandchildren? You know, do we want to keep it clean, so to speak, without any negative things in it? And what you have done, in my opinion, I think in order to be real, to tell your true story, you know, you have to do what you did, which is to tell it like it is. And I want to ask Dave Rutstein just to elaborate on that point, if I could. You know, what are the parameters of being able to pass on to grandchildren something that may contain negative, even frightening images? Dave, can you respond to that in your writing?
Oh, he's muted.
Okay. Can we get you to unmute, Dave?
Is that better?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, did you hear
Yes, I did hear the question. First, a bit of background. I've had the privilege over many years of teaching courses on ethical wills. Carol Sherman was in that class, I think, earlier this year. And what I've learned as I've gone along is that several things. One is that one has to be able to say, having written the document, that it sounds like me. We keep talking about
I've lost everything.
on that.
Oh, there.
Am I back? I'm back.
Yes.
So we encourage the folks to, in writing it, to be sure that it comes across such that someone who knew you would know that you were the author. Then I think it's very important to simply be frank and honest. If you come across as a saint, it won't have the impact in later years, or for people who will read this who never knew you, they may not accept it as being very valuable. So I think those things are preeminent when one sits down to write. I hope I've been responsive to your question.
That was perfect. That was perfect. All right. Is there someone else who's written a little bit that they would be willing to share?
I have written something.
Okay. Let me see.
Okay.
Who do we have right now?
Linda.
This is Linda. Linda. Oh my God, my hair looks a mess. Okay, I wrote about the Jewish holiday. One of the most memorable Jewish holidays that I remember when growing up was Hanukkah. What child wouldn't like getting presents, right? I was from a middle-class family. My father was an assistant manager of a bakery in a Toledo department store called Tikki's, which was located in downtown Toledo. In the 1950s, this was very popular, and everyone would go down to do their shopping. This was before malls sprung up in the suburbs. Everyone would go down to Tikki's. My mother was a housewife, and she took care of me and my sister. She never learned how to drive a car until much later in life. So we were just a typical average family from the 1950s. Father knew best, and Mom would always side with him. When it came to celebrating Hanukkah, we had a happy Hanukkah sign on the fireplace, a round marble coffee table in the living room, which would be laden with gifts all wrapped up in Hanukkah paper. My mom was an expert gift wrapper. There would be gifts from my grandparents and my aunt and uncle and my parents. The gifts would be stacked so high and around the base underneath the coffee table. We could open up just one gift per night, or if my grandparents were over for dinner and after lighting the candles and sing Hanukkah songs, we were allowed to open 2 presents. My parents would always sing Rock of Ages in German and walked around the dining room table and the living room, and everyone was expected to follow them. We got a little fidgety as first of all, they were singing in German. And secondly, all we wanted to do was just open presents. In my mind, they were stalling, but it was their tradition. Believe it or not, I think my son might still do it, but sing in Hebrew. I never felt that I was underprivileged, and even if we did not get expensive gifts, we would get at least one thing that we asked for. I do remember after all these years that once I wanted a Brownie camera and I got it. I was so happy. This tradition that was started by my parents continued many years when my children were born. And to this day, the famous Hanukkah table is in my niece's home in their family room in Columbus, Ohio. Now, whether or not they continue celebrating as we did, I do not know. Writing this essay has brought back many fond memories of my childhood. That's it.
Oh, that was wonderful. Just wonderful. Because, you know, if you think about it, think of the gift that we have with our memories.
Mhm.
And we know that sometimes we can outlive our memory if it fails us.
Mhm.
And these are such precious things to pass on to
Mhm.
our children, grandchildren.
Mhm.
As you know, they can't get this from the news. They can't get
No, right.
books from their teachers, from the media. You are the only person that can give this gift to your
And it's from the heart. It's from the heart too.
from the heart, and it's precious stories that gives a window into your life when you
Yeah.
and this is exactly the kind of thing that we're talking about. So thank you.
I got that. After I wrote it, I said, this is what he's getting at.
One of my most precious memories from childhood is the old brass menorah that my parents lit every year, which I still have in my possession and will one day pass on. You know, the ritual objects that we inherit are precious legacy.
Yes.
Those kinds of things. So thank you.
I still have it too. I forgot to add that to my story.
Okay. Anyone else have anything that they wrote?
I have something I'll share.
Okay.
This is one of my earliest childhood memories of being Jewish. I remember going to temple on Simchas Torah and getting candy apples and raisins. Our temple was conservadox, as I call it, and not geared at all towards children. But that night was fun. Most other services were very, very long and mostly in Hebrew. Friday nights, the kids were called up to the bima for grape juice when Kiddush was recited. I'm not sure if I went up because I was very shy. Never underestimate the impression of food to celebrate Jewish Shabbat and holidays for children.
Mhm. Thank you. Absolutely. Very, very nice memory. My earliest memory was winning the most beautiful costume for Purim contest at my conservative temple when I was 7 years old. My mother dressed me up as King Ahasuerus with the golden scepter and the crown, and they gave me a little keychain which actually says for a bar mitzvah boy, and I still have the keychain to this day. So, you know, it's those kinds of things that are powerful, that we remember, that we pass on. You know, the time is now to write all these wonderful memories down, because, you know, we don't know what tomorrow brings. And our memory is just one of the greatest assets that we have. We're not so fortunate like some people who have what's called HSAM, highly superior autobiographical memory. I'm sure you've heard about these kinds of people. You can pick any day in their life, and they will be able to tell you exactly what they did on that day. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, they can recall in minute detail every day of their life, obviously beyond infancy, and to be able to recount that. We're not so lucky. If we're lucky, if you're good with your memory, perhaps you're good with placing calendar years. Somebody can mention a year in your life and you can say, oh, I was in college that year. That's the year I had my first child, or that's the year I got married. You may be able to remember parents or grandparents' birthdays or anniversaries. I happen to be good with that. My wife, not so good with dates. Perhaps you can even remember birthdays for aunts, uncles, cousins, and friends. Yeah, I don't know. Memory seems to be an innate skill, almost a type of gift that you have. And if you have that gift, by all means, use it. Write down your memories so they don't get erased and lost forever. I'm good with people's names. I guess obviously that's an important skill for a rabbi to have. And for some strange reason, phone numbers. I may forget a person's name, but I know their phone number. Isn't that crazy? But we all have different capacities for things. And there are techniques for pulling these distant memories into the present. As Oscar Wilde once wrote, memory is the diary we all carry around with us. In Pirkei Avot, the Ethics of the Fathers, one of my favorite sayings is there's 4 kinds of minds: a sieve, a strainer, a sifter, and a sponge. What kind is the best? What kind of mind do you have? Are you a sponge which soaks up absolutely everything and remembers everything? The old expression, I have a mind like a sieve. Well, we forget everything. Perhaps you have a mind like a strainer, where the dreg is strained out and you retain the good. And then there's a sifter, which is probably the opposite of that. You forget the good and retain the bad. So obviously, the best kind of mind to have is a strainer. You want to remember what's important, and you want to forget the things that are unimportant. You've heard the expression, I remember what I did 50 years ago, but I can't remember what I had for lunch yesterday. Well, why is that? Because what happened 50 years ago, what you remember are the salient points, the milestone occasions that you remember. Unimportant details like what you ate for lunch is not something you're going to remember. So that's the reason that we remember things we don't know, but don't remember things as unimportant as what we ate. As Dave Rutstein wisely told me, we always act as though we are 15 years younger. Our old age is always 15 years away from the age that we are. So if you're 75, old age isn't until you're 90. If you're 90, old age isn't until you're 105. We never feel old. But the fact is, we are getting older. And as our memories begin to get a little shaky, we need to write these precious stories down now. And as you can see, it's a great exercise to do. Again, we're doing this for in most cases, we're doing this for our friends or our family, but we get certain things out of it too. We gain from this process. Dave, could you reflect on that for just a minute? What is it that we get out of writing these legacy letters?
Well, I think I could speak from firsthand experience on that, and the literature speaks volumes on this subject. When you write an ethical will, you really get introspective. You really go deep and try to understand first yourself, what your values are. And so, for example, when I wrote an ethical will about 10 years ago, one of the subjects that I chose was honesty, to pass that trait on, that value system on to those who would read it in later years. So it has an impact on the way you live your life from that point on. Let's assume that you've been in a store, we're not there these days during COVID, and we certainly don't carry much cash around, but under normal circumstances, we've all had the experience in which we have given the cashier a $10 bill, and the cashier somehow erroneously believed it was a 20 and gave too much change back. So I've literally had that experience, and I've asked myself the question, you wrote about honesty in your ethical will. So are you going to live by what you wrote, or are those just words on a piece of paper? I think those who've been through the experience, I know Carol has, think about life in perhaps a little different way by applying that which you've asked others to apply in their lives in future years.
So as we said, you know, writing these documents helps us to achieve the highest vision of our best selves, or as we would say in more common parlance, if you talk the talk, you got to walk the walk. So thank you for that insight. I actually would like to read you Carol Sherman's ethical will she wrote for her family.
Rabbi, can I say something first?
Good. Yeah.
Okay, I did take Dave's class last spring through WCA when they offered the ethical will class. And I think what the direction I went as Dave was talking is to pick out the values that I've gained through my life that actually I use people in my life who bring values to light and how important the values have been. And it ended up being, quote, a Jewish ethical will, although I was writing an ethical will. And more than the story of my life, I kind of built it around the themes that made up my life. So it's a different direction than some of the people, like the one woman who had read her story about her family and starting in Europe, which was absolutely mind, mesmerizing to listen to her family history. That wasn't the direction I went, and it's just a different view of how you would think of an ethical will. I based it mainly on the values that built my life and what I would like my family to know about me, not necessarily that they should follow those, but what they should know about me as far as how I believed and how I live my life.
Thank you.
Possibly I misunderstood this course, which I thought was writing your memoir, like a Jewish memoir, as opposed to, I didn't know it was about ethical will. So yes, mine was not
Judy,
from an ethical will.
you didn't misunderstand a thing.
No.
What you wrote was absolutely perfect. And
Oh, okay.
I have something in common with you. My parents were from Europe, and the stories that my mother left to me on a cassette tape about her early childhood in Germany and going on the Kinder transport and having to survive the bombings in London. These are the kinds of stories you want to pass on to your children and grandchildren. Your story is
Judy, yours was great.
You.
Yeah, it was great, Judy. It really was.
Yours was great.
It was just a different take.
Yeah,
on how we want to do it.
I wasn't sure, since I didn't take the last course in ethical will, what that was really about.
And I think before Rabbi read mine, I wanted to explain mine was totally going in a different direction than yours was. And I think it's really an individual thing, Rabbi. It's really how you want to preserve your past for your family.
Right. Yeah, this is not a course in ethical. Let's not get too hung up in the names.
Okay.
Whether you call it a legacy letter or a forever letter, which is the name of a book that Dave introduced me to, which I ordered, written by a rabbi, or a Jewish spiritual memoir, or an ethical will. The name is not important. What's important is you telling your own story. I can't emphasize that. Here's Carol's ethical will. And she starts out with actually words to a song written by a Jewish composer. Am I awake? Am I prepared? Are you listening to my prayer? Can you hear my voice? Can you understand? Am I awake? Am I prepared? This is an introduction to the Baruch Hu, the prayer praising God. I do not consider myself religious, but I feel I have led a spiritual and soulful life. I rejoice in both the music and solitude Judaism has provided me, and I have found my greatest satisfaction in life through my faith. As the above song relates to my preparedness and communication with God, I hope this letter communicates to you my prayers for you. I want you to hear my voice and understand what I have to say about me and my life that may enrich your lives. My life has been full and beautiful, and I'm grateful to many people who have been a part of it. The first is Booby, my mother's mother. When Booby laughed, I felt joy. When she experienced grief, I was sad. When she taught life's lessons, I learned. Booby and I were soulmates in the truest sense. I pray that each of you have the fortune to share this same closeness with one other person in your lifetime. My dad passed away at the early age of 52, and it saddens me that he never met any of you. He was one of the kindest people you could ever know. He taught me that kindness can make our world a beautiful place. My mother, who you knew as Mama Nunny, taught me about need. Sometimes we think of a needy person as a negative attribute, but because of her need, I became a better listener and a better advocate. She taught me how aging can hurt as our physical bodies deteriorate and the importance of maintaining our health as best as possible. She taught me to have gratitude for each morning I open my eyes and have the strength to experience a new day. All of you children and grandchildren have taught me that love may change expression, but still is a constant. From the babies who snuggled into my neck, to the toddlers who fell into my arms at the bottom of the sliding board, to the young adults who gave pecks on the cheek as a greeting, I know that I have always had your love. My husband, Bruce, who I have shared over half my lifetime with, has given me an abundance of blessings. He has taught me to love and to be a lover. He has taught me to communicate and compromise. He has given me support and encouragement in everything I do. I'm fortunate to have had him as my lifetime partner. I'm particularly grateful for my health. I was married at 21 and had children and grandchildren at a young enough age that I was able to play with you and be an active part of your lives. Now, as a mature adult, I still have the good fortune, health, and energy to participate in sports and activities that give me personal pleasure. Whether it be a morning walk with friends sharing stories, a beautiful sunny day playing 9 holes of golf, or a quick set of pickleball games, I believe that activity brings joy to your soul. In the spiritual world of Judaism, one talks about the 10 sefirot, or attributes of God. The sefirot are arranged to represent the tree of life, as in the medallion I wear daily. This arrangement can also represent the right and left sides of the body, the right side being the receiving attributes, and the left side being the giving attributes. To have a good life, it is believed that you need to balance these two sides of the body. When I am gone, I would like you to know that my life has been full and blessed. I have tried to live a balanced life, giving back to my family, friends, and community as much as I have received. I wish for each of you to have beautiful lives filled with good health, happiness, and balance. May each of you go from strength to strength with all my love. Thank you, Carol, for allowing us to share that beautiful testimony. Powerful, very powerful. Okay. Now, in the remaining time we have, sometimes ethical wills mention each child individually. And I'll just give you a little bit of an example of that from a woman. This is from Ethical Wills by Jack Reamer, A Modern Jewish Treasury. And this lady, Rosie Rosenzweig, she wrote something to each of her children. Elizabeth, I wish for you happiness and stability, that your feelings fly toward the dream of fulfillment, but still be balanced by your keen intelligence. I hope you remember our times of understanding, and wherever I am, I will send whatever healing is possible. I trust the mountain guide sense in you to go to peaks I'll never see. Be there for me. Benjamin, I wish that your keen intellectual nature be rounded by that intuition that comes from the artist in you. At 13, your insight into the Akedah was remarkable. May that become more cultivated as you grow older. I live for you in the applause of that day that brightened your face, and the applause now for such continued adventurous and original trailblazing. And then she goes on to talk to two of her other children. And to me, and this reminded me of when Jacob blessed his 12 sons, the 12 tribes of Israel, towards the end of the book of Genesis. And some of those blessings, you know, were not the most complimentary words. And so I wanted to address this question to Dave. Is it advisable to mention children individual or grandchildren individually in our legacy letter? Is that something wise thing to do, or should we are there any negative outcomes that we may want to avoid?
Well, the first thing I would say, this is a very common question in this field. You've written the document and you are not sure whether to single people out individually. Let me first say, and this applies to everything that you're doing here, there are no rights and there are no wrongs. This is your document. There's no template. There's no one formula. People in my classes have always sought to have sort of a roadmap as to how they might do this. And we resist doing that because, again, hearkening back to what I said a few minutes ago, you want this to be your document. You want it to be something unique that no one else could have written. But I will say now, in responding to your question, Rabbi, that people should pause to consider how the individuals who later read the document might receive it. Indeed, one paragraph might seem a little longer than another paragraph. One paragraph might be later interpreted as having a slightly different tone, maybe less positive. So someone might misinterpret later at a time when perhaps you're not there to correct that misimpression. And so you do it any way you want, but there is that risk, there is that danger in doing it that way. When I wrote mine, I wrote a more generic document. I think the solution to that perhaps dilemma is that if you want to express individual thoughts on a very personal basis to individuals, often grandchildren, do it in a separate private letter to them. Keep this document as general for all who read it. In that way, you will not be offending anyone.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much. And let me just thank you for your participation today and sharing wisdom and expertise with us. And I'm just so glad that you joined us last week as well. One more question, and I want to go back to what Bert Zucker asked last week. When's the best time to reveal this document? What are the advantages to sharing it while we're still alive? And what are the advantages of waiting until it's read at our funeral?
If you're asking me?
Yes. Yeah, what are your thoughts on it? Or waiting till, you know, we're gone?
Well, first I would say that as a lapsed lawyer, a retired lawyer, first let me ask, is there anybody from Baltimore here? Well, there was a noted jurist, a judge named Simon Soboleff in Baltimore, who in a group setting like this was asked, he said, why is it, Judge Soboleff, that whenever a lawyer is asked a question, he responds with a question, asking a question. And he responded to that question by saying, why not? That is, responding with a question. I'm, as I say, a lapsed lawyer. Let me ask the group that same question as to, now you've written the document, is it a time to share it with those to whom you're passing it on, or do you wait until after you're gone? Who has a response to that? Which way should you do it?
I don't think am I unmuted?
Yes.
I don't think like you said, I don't think there is a right or a wrong, but I would want to share mine while I was living and have possibly a response from my children or grandchildren and see how they reacted to it. And maybe there are things that my own children didn't know.
And not only that, but perhaps there's a way to draw closer to your children through having these kinds of discussions while you're still here.
I agree.
That's a majority opinion. And I've seen in the times that I've interacted with folks in these classes that they have shared not only the final product, but often have had discussions along the way with their family, which created a vehicle sometimes to unlock some subjects which didn't have a vehicle in the same way. But I did share this with my children 10 years ago and had some wonderful discussions. Also, again, there's the issue of misinterpretation. If you wait, perhaps something you say in that document could later be misinterpreted with your not having a chance to correct it.
Great. Another thing also, you know, I don't know how many of you have grandchildren who live close by, or if they live cross country, across the miles, and you see them infrequently throughout the year. But I have 6 grandchildren ranging in age from 5 to 13. None of them really know who I am. You know, I'm good ship lollipop. I'm the best friend. We play, but they don't really know the other side of me as a rabbi, as how I think as an adult. And I miss that sharing with them. And one advantage of writing something like this and sharing it, at least perhaps when they're a little older, when they're teenagers, is you can have meaningful discussions while you're still here and grow closer and create a bond that you would never have. I mean, how many of your grandchildren really know who you are and really understand you as a person? It's pretty rare because they're kids. And as they get a little older, it's a way to really share some of our stories with them and help us to get to know each other better. Okay, this has been wonderful and enlightening. I want to show one additional, I want to give you, again, all these assignments are optional. I want to ask Rabbi Boxman to put on the screen a little graphic of what's called a legacy tree. And I'm going to give you your optional assignment for next week. Okay, Rabbi Boxman, are you there?
No.
Okay. Well, I guess we won't be doing that. Did she leave the session? Oh, well, okay. Then we'll do it next week. And next week we're going to do my Jewish identity spectrum, which is going to help you to really to start to think about where is it that your passions lie? What aspects of Jewish identity do you embrace? Are you more religious? Are you more of a cultural Jew? Is Israel your prime motivation for being Jewish? Is it anti-Semitism, the Holocaust? So those kinds of things. And then I created a new model just for this class called the Jewish Life Wheel, which is going to help you plot how observant you are and how connected you are to the faith and matters of whether you're enmeshed with the tradition, disengaged, and how that changes over the course of our life. So we're going to look at those 2 models. Hopefully the book written by Rabbi Ilana Ziman called The Forever Letter, Writing What We Believe for Those We Love, will arrive, and I can share some wisdom from that book, and then we'll continue right along. So I guess I cannot give you the assignment for the legacy tree this week. So sorry, you have no homework. Keep writing.
Rabbi, I think that just having these discussions triggers so many different emotions in each of us and hits little parts that we remember as we hear others. When I wrote mine, I only got up to the part of introducing my maternal grandparents and how they molded. But hearing all these other things, I have a flood of memories that this group helped unveil.
Oh, great. Thank you, Joyce. And that's important too. We're going to continue next week with other techniques to help us remember. And there are actual exercises we can do that bring back these memories, because they're all there. They've just been covered up by so much that they're really they're subconscious, and we have to get at them. But there are ways to do that. All right. So again, Rabbi Boxman, are you here, or did you something happen? I guess she signed off, and we'll meet same time, same station next Wednesday, 1 p.m. Again, I want to thank Dave Rutstein for being with us today and sharing all those great insights and wisdom. And of course, you're welcome to join us for the remaining classes if you're able. We love having you. And thanks, Carol, for sharing your ethical will. And thank all of you for sharing your stories and what you wrote. You know, the first time, it's a little bit intimidating, but I think once you do it the first time and you realize, wow, this is really received well, and I'm supportive, and it makes it even easier for the next time. So keep writing, and we'll see you next week.